Hello and welcome to On the Kerbs. I'm your host, Team Hours Daily. Joining me this week is Asian Le Mans driver Thomas Merrill. We caught up recently to chat about how he got into Trans Am racing, what it was like to win the championship there, how the switch to endurance racing challenged him in a completely different way, where he'd love to go racing in the future, and much more. I hope you enjoy our conversation. So, hi Thomas, thank you very much for being here today. First of all, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. I've been busy, been on the road traveling a whole bunch, but glad to have a few minutes at home before I get back going again.
Yes, that's the majority of the time. Not enough time in the car, too much time traveling. Is that the adage there?
Yeah, pretty much.
So I want to take things back to the very start with you and ask you what first got you interested in motorsport.
I was fortunate to grow up in a motorsport family. My parents were Porsche Club members in California, and on the weekends we would go out to Laguna Seca or Sonoma, and they would do their time trial stuff, and I would just kind of be in the paddock taking it all in. And when I got old enough to drive go-karts, my parents used that as an incentive to get better grades. So if I studied harder, I would get better and faster go-karts, and it all kind of snowballed from there.
Going to say it doesn't take much for it to snowball from that perspective. You're getting to give a kid a go-kart and watch the rest happen, essentially.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I was fortunate to kind of pick it up pretty quickly and have some good early results, and that was just more motivating to push harder and pursue it further.
You say you were kind of left to roam free at the paddock as a child, but was there any kind of one moment that you can remember sticking out in particular from that time that really kind of hammered it home to you that this is something you'd be interested in doing?
Gosh, I had so many cool memories of watching my parents compete and also having an appreciation for the machinery. I would, when I was going around the paddock on my bike, I'd be looking at all the race cars, and I was fascinated with, particularly, in club racing, you've got all different cars in all sorts of different classes, but I was really fascinated with the cars that were really built to be proper race cars. And so in those days, people would take a 914 and they would cut the roof off and they'd make it to look almost like a prototype. They put big wings on it. And there was a couple particular cars in the paddock that had those, and they had big, Goodyear slick tires on them. And that really kind of fired me up. And I thought, okay, this is really what I want to be involved in.
So, like you said, it snowballed quite quickly, but in quite a successful way as well, because you won the Trans Am Championship last year, and I'm intrigued about how that campaign compared to previous years and how you're able to put a successful campaign together.
That's a good question. I've had a hard time with luck in the last couple of years. I felt like, I don't want to say I felt like I was owed a championship at that point, but
enough character building for you for a bit.
Yeah. We've been myself and the Copa organization, I think, have put together a championship winning program year after year, but for whatever reason, through component failures or through accidents that happen or what have you, we've not been able to fight it at the sharp end. And actually, last year was looking that way as well. Our first couple races of the season, we had big mechanical woes that held us back. We had an odd brake failure at the second race in Charlotte. And the simple things like the brake bleeder fitting just had the wrong thread pitch, and that came out at Charlotte. And then at Laguna Seca, at my home race, one of the radiator hoses, it just was a bad clamp from the factory. It just fell off. So
you must have been thinking, "Oh, you're kidding me, right? This is the issue."
Yeah, and I hate it for the crew because obviously it doesn't, reflect well on them. But it wasn't, them putting the car
either of you can do in that instance. It's just definition of bad luck there.
Exactly. But we really pulled ourselves up by our bootstraps last year and really got focused on just pushing ahead kind of regardless. And race after race, we found the race wins we were looking for. We found the good and podium finishes, and it culminated in a championship that we all felt like we really deserved. But it didn't come easy, that's for sure.
No, and I suppose, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but did it feel more of a victory because it had taken so long and it felt that extra bit sweet than maybe it would have done if you got it a bit sooner, or?
100%. Yeah. Although we were, we were looking back on the championship, and we got taken out by a competitor at Nashville as well, and so there were a number of races that we felt like, gosh, if this one thing didn't happen, it would have been a podium or a win.
Hmm.
And in that scenario, we probably would have clinched the championship probably 2 or 3 rounds early. So, in a way, yes, it was immensely satisfying to have that result. But at the end of the day, we did feel like it was the result that we had earned.
No, definitely. I don't think you can say that you didn't put enough hard work into it either.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, it's not easy for everyone in the paddock is putting in hard work. And certainly I felt for Rafa, he had some pretty bad luck there in the last race that enabled us to compete for the championship. And, kudos to those
Well,
guys.
someone else's turn for some bad luck, let's face it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, everyone's working hard. So we just do the best we can and hope for the best.
And that success has continued because you competed in the Asian Le Mans series earlier this year with Walkenhorst Motorsport and you won the title there. So I'm intrigued about what that was like, especially as you only had one race off the podium, and how does that compare to the Trans Am Championship?
It's the racing with the kind of the ACO and the Le Mans championships is very unique as it compares to Trans Am, for a couple of reasons. I think that the big thing in Trans Am is it's all sprint racing. And so it's less of a strategic race application and more of a, how do we set the car up through the weekend to be the best race car possible, and then just drive it hard all the way to the finish. Whereas, in an Asian Le Mans series, you've got an immense complication of, the driver pairings and how you strategize for your driver changes, how you strategize for your pit stops, what the rules are for what you can do under yellows or under, the safety car periods. And the minimum drive times kind of were huge for us as far as figuring out, okay, if this driver can only drive for this much, but then this driver has to drive for that much, how do we organize that in a way that works? And I think Walkenhorst did a really good job with the strategy and put us in a good position to have consistent results. I mean, the technology is so different too. I mean, driving the Trans Am car, I love it because I'm an old school guy. The car is completely analog. There's no driver assists of any kind. We even have an H pattern gear shifter in the car. And so I like that adds a degree of complexity, and it preserves a lot of the purity of driving a vehicle quickly, as far as getting all of those things right on a consistent basis. The modern race cars are cool and they're fast, but they're also quite easy to drive. And so I credit that to my ability to go over there and get up to speed right away. Is, when in a car that's got ABS, traction control, paddle shift, it's quite easy to kind of get up to speed. Getting it quick is obviously as hard as any other race car, but getting up to that baseline speed, I think is a lot easier with these modern race cars. So that certainly helped me in that case.
And it's so important as well to get that all of those elements so correct when you have such a short championship like the Asian Le Mans series. You've only got 4 races, and you've got them in sets of 2 back to back across a weekend, and it can be very easy for that to snowball in the wrong direction.
Oh man, it was it's nerve-wracking for sure. And I felt for a lot of the guys that had bad luck early and crashed their car in the first race, because effectively your championship's done at that point. So you're kind of white knuckling it to an extent through all of those races, because it can all be gone in a heartbeat for sure. And it was more intense than I thought it was going to be, frankly.
You say as well, the team got the strategy right. I mean, obviously they did because of the result, but I'm intrigued about what the dynamic was like between you, Chandler, and Nikki. Had you worked together before at any point? Had you met, or was this all completely fresh for all 3 of you?
Totally fresh. Nikki and Chandler had worked together prior. They had actually driven with Walkenhorst in the previous years there. But I was coming in totally fresh. But, I really credit those two for giving me, for welcoming me and giving me the tools I needed to get up to speed quickly. Nikki is as at the top of the sport, but he was extremely gracious with sharing everything with me that he could to kind of help that process. And we just, the 3 of us happened to get along quite well. So I was pretty happy with that. And that really enabled us, I think, to perform better as a group.
Was there any concern from your part that kind of as the newbie to the team, essentially, how you were going to maybe fit into the team, and if that would be potential not to not a disadvantage for them, but you might be the weak link, and how you would deal with that if that did happen.
Always, always. I wish I could say I was brimming with confidence and would show up and say, "Oh yeah, I got this." But anytime, certainly in my experience, I don't know how it's like for other guys, but there's always this doubt in the back of my head, when I show up somewhere new, like, oh gosh, how hard is this going to be? But almost always, the first time I roll out of pit lane and I feel the car underneath me, all that goes away. And I immediately understand, okay, this feels like it should. I can handle this bit. But the big thing is you just don't want to screw up. You don't want to, get in the car the first time, try to go fast and then make a big mistake and kind of set everybody back. So and I've experienced that a lot. I've been able to jump into a lot of different programs over the last couple of years as the newbie. And so I'm a bit
used experience there.
Yeah. But I mean, every single time there's this twinge of doubt just before getting in the car the first time, like, oh gosh, I hope I can measure up,
I suppose it's one of those things as well, like you say, it goes away as soon as you start driving then, because I suppose what you're doing. You've got that basic kind of element there, at least, that, okay, get in the car, do your job and get on with it. And I suppose, does everything else just disappear then? It's kind of like automatic for you then? Or do you take a couple of laps for you to get into it on the mindset front of it, or is it just kind of, it clicks?
Do you know what it's like? It's like the start of the race. And I don't think I know any driver that isn't nervous before the start of the race and even on the pace lap coming to the green. But almost universally, we all say as soon as the green flag drops, the nerves go away because your focus is demanded on the task.
There's no time to think about anything else.
Exactly. And so I would liken it to that, as far as kind of once I get out of pit lane, I get the thing, in the racetrack, and I can feel the feedback from the tire. It's kind of automatic at that point, and I'm kind of just back at the job and kind of thinking, okay, what can the car do better? What can I do better? And taking it one step at a time.
So you're back in Trans Am this year again. What is it about that series that you just love so much?
I think one of the things that is the my least favorite part about other forms of sports car racing is the BOP side of things, where all the manufacturers are trying to maintain their level of competitiveness without showing too much and managing that game, which is just a part of the sport. We don't really have that in Trans Am. So there's a couple different chassis you can run. There's a couple different engine packages, but at the end of the day, everyone is just kind of going all the time. So you always know where you stand. As I said, the equipment itself being completely analog, it favors a driver that understands a bit of mechanical sympathy as well. If you understand how to manage the transmission and manage the braking and manage the car and not just burn it to the ground, you can find an advantage there. And so I really appreciate that. And then the racing itself, I mean, these cars, they're not too aero dependent, so you can run really close to the cars in front of you. You can touch laterally and longitudinally and not really damage the car. They're really robust that way. So it's really great elbows out, pure racing. And it's just always fun, no matter what.
And I'm intrigued then, because going back to the Asian Le Mans series briefly there, because that's kind of the opposite of Trans Am in a lot of ways there, because you want to get out, you want to get your elbows up, but you've got the other two categories racing at the same time, which you're kind of racing but not racing. It depends where you are on the overall order of it. Was that easy for you to get used to, or was that very much disciplining yourself, like, no, I'm not racing that car, I've got to focus on this job instead?
Sometimes I do have to flip the switch and remind myself, like, okay, maybe I shouldn't be intentionally finding opportunities to make contact with other drivers. But I will say the multi-class racing I find immensely stimulating. And I've always enjoyed it from my time at IMSA, my time at Le Mans last year. I really enjoy that there's, even, separate of the race that you're having with your direct competitors, there's never a dull moment. You're always watching for the other traffic and managing that. And I think it's a cool element to that style of racing, that it kind of makes the race go by quickly, because you're not just out there driving around by yourself ever. There's always something going on. But you're right. Sometimes you do have to go, okay, maybe I don't need to push for every inch, for every lap, every corner. Maybe I need to kind of work with the flow and be a little nicer on the racetrack. So yeah, there is an adjustment period for sure, particularly in, an environment and drivers that I don't know. That's kind of a huge thing, is kind of trying to know who you're racing against. And in that dynamic, you don't know which of the three drivers is in the car that you're competing against unless you ask the team. So that dynamic,
and they might not
too,
tell you anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's a dynamic where maybe that little bit of reserve kind of judgment makes sense, as opposed to just all out, competing.
Definitely. And as well, from a fan perspective, you see in this case 4-hour race, and you're used to maybe a 1 hour or 2 hour thing maximum, and think, oh, 4 hours, how am I going to get through all of that? But then when you get into it and you get past the chaos normally of the first first 20 minutes or so, because I mean, the last race in Abu Dhabi, it seemed that some people had forgotten it was an endurance race and just went for it from the off.
Right, yes.
It does kind of go quite quickly as well from a fan perspective, because like you said, there's always something going on. There's always something to pay attention to, and trying to pay attention to which driver's there and how that's going to change from what you've seen before. And even if you did know who all the other drivers and all the other cars were in your category, there's still the other two categories there, and you don't know how they're going to behave either.
Yeah, exactly. The dynamic is pretty intense. Although I will say, the cool thing about that style of endurance racing is the driver comfort has come a long way. The other side of the coin with the benefit, what I like about Trans Am is the cars are bloody hot on the inside. To give you an example, we used to run an aluminum shift knob on the shift lever, and we had to switch to a Delrin knob because we were burning our hands on the aluminum.
I was going to say, I can imagine that could.
Yeah, and whereas in the BMW that I drove with Walkenhorst, I actually had to turn the air conditioning off in the night stints because it was too cold. So
something you don't have to think you'd be doing in Dubai or Abu Dhabi.
Yeah.
So, which tracks are you most looking forward to this year? And do you have a favorite of those, or just generally, and a third one that you'd love to race on but haven't yet?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm also competing in the Carrera Cup Championship this year in North America, and we're going to Long Beach coming up soon, which I've never raced at, and I'm really, really excited for that one. So that's at the front of my mind at the moment, because I'm currently preparing for it and trying to dial that in. And any street course race has always been a favorite of mine. So that one in particular, I'm really looking forward to. As far as the
Trans Am street tracks to the racetracks, or does it depend on track to track?
It's an apples and oranges thing, but I like I've actually had good success at street courses as well. So I think there's something about it that jives with my driving style and kind of the way that I do things. But and the kind of the high consequence nature of the racetrack, I think, adds another element to the competition that kind of separates the good from the great in a way. And I have a big appreciation for that.
Focus up a bit.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And if you get something right, you feel validated. So I always talk about, like, I like racing at COTA, but I maintain that if you took a bulldozer and you got rid of all of the paved runoff, the track would go up 10 notches in my book, because you'd have to get it right each time.
Oh, yeah,
you wouldn't have that room for error. So so that being said, a track like Road America, that's very old school, that's got a good flow to it, but still has that consequence and that high speed, you have to get it right nature. The track we just raced at, Road Atlanta, another one of my favorites, where high commitment, and you can't afford to get it wrong, so getting it right really makes a big difference. Places like that I'm a big fan of. Trans Am used to race up in Canada at Motorsport, and through the COVID years, they've now since taken it off the schedule. But I would love for them to add it, because I've actually never been, and I've always heard about how cool that racetrack is, and how old school and high speed it is. And so that's one I would put on my to-do list for going and racing there.
Push you for a favorite then? Be really mean.
Gosh, that's a good question. Usually when people ask me what my favorite track is, I just say the next one, because I'm so fortunate to do what I do that, they're all great in their own way. But
you're just happy to still be there.
Yeah. I quite like Lime Rock. I've won that race twice in Trans Am, and it's simple, but it's high speed, and it's one of the few places you can literally jump a race car off the racetrack every lap. So you can't go wrong with that.
No, I can't argue with that either, to be honest. It's brings flashbacks of the old like classic Formula One cars when you see them just going over some ridges like we could definitely couldn't do that with the modern cars.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So what's been the most challenging part of your racing career so far?
I would say maintaining it. It's really hard to continue to do this well and maintaining a high level of competition kind of as I get older and as the new crop of racers are coming in is difficult. But from year to year, I always tell people it's I'm very fortunate to do what I do, but doing this for a living, it's like having to apply for your job every year. You're not quite sure at the end of the
There's
year
never a
what
guarantee.
you're doing the following year, and there's a lot of anxiety built into having that on an annual basis. But yeah, the hardest part is that kind of that adaptation to as things evolve. How do I stay relevant? How do I stay competitive? How do I do all of those things at a top level? How do I continue to add value to the teams I drive for and the sponsors that I represent? Which kind of that's the name of the game at the end of the day. But continuing to do it involves just putting in the work and remaining kind of relentless. So I would say that's probably the hardest part. Once you get to the racetrack and you're there, that's the easy part. I think putting the deals together prior is the hard part.
The amount of times in the last couple of weeks where I've had that kind of same sentence from other people saying, well, you know what, driving is the least stressful part of all of it. I'm thinking, how the hell is that the case? But it makes
Yeah.
sense. The more I'm hearing about it, the more I'm thinking, yeah, I suppose when you think about it, you can just get on with what you actually love doing and you don't have to worry about any of the rest of it because you're just focused on the thing that you enjoy.
Yeah, and I think right now the thing I struggle the most with is I'm competing at a level of professional driving, not necessarily in a position to hire a manager, so I'm kind of self-managed and balancing that with competing, you kind of doing all the work prior and then showing up and then being the athlete and doing all that stuff it can be taxing, particularly with a busy schedule like I have and the different series that I'm competing in and all the different teams I'm driving for and all the different sponsors I'm representing
Make
and all
sure
the
you turn
travel.
up at the right track for the right car at the right time.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. If anything happened to my calendar on my laptop, I would be absolutely because it's full of stuff that I can't recall off the top of my head if it weren't written down. So yeah, that is the hardest part.
On a less stressful note, then, or maybe not, depending on your answer here, which car have you most enjoyed racing in?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. Um, the racing, I would say, just the purity of the competition, I would say Trans Am's probably at the top of the list. But I will say one of the greatest experiences of my life was racing LMP2 a couple of years ago. The capability of that car and what it can do, but together with traffic management and competing in IMSA with that thing, I recall memories of Watkins Glen in that car. There were only two corners on the racetrack where we weren't pulling 3 lateral G, and you're doing it for 2 hours at a time and surrounded by
You
4 other
slept well that
classes.
night.
Yeah. Yeah, that was I would say if I were to pick the best car I've ever driven, it would be that Orca LMP2 car. But the racing itself and the closeness of the competition, I would say Trans Am's probably at the top of the list.
The LMP2 car, was that a little bit like taking a race car out onto public roads and then having to weave in and out of traffic?
Yes, I was blown away at how fast we were going by the GTD cars, which are not slow.
No,
they're
no.
they're going very, very quickly, and we were passing them like they were rental cars. It was pretty astounding. Most of my experience in that car was just getting over the fear of the consequence of what would happen if I went that little bit too quick. And because the car just was so capable and could do so much, particularly at a track like Watkins Glen that has so much grip. So that was a really, really cool experience, and yeah, kind of mind blowing how much faster it will go.
Going back to the Trans Am for a second, I just had a thought there. Do you think part of the reason that you love it as well so much, I'm going back to what you were saying at the beginning when we were saying about what got you interested in the first place, was you saw these these cars growing up that essentially had been stripped down a little bit, modified heavily, and just built for pure purpose of racing. Do you think that's probably what got you into Trans Am more than anything else? Because there is that kind of same mentality and approach there to the racing series.
Yeah, there's a purity to it from the ground up race car build. My initial, I will say I have to credit my first car owner, Richard Deal, with getting me into Trans Am primarily. He was a driver I was coaching in his Porsche that he was racing in a Porsche Club Series out in California. And he decided he wanted to step up to a higher level of racing, and he wanted to support me at the same time. And so we looked at the options, and Trans Am fit the bill in terms of the budget, the calendar, the type of race car that it was. For at that time, it was the best kept secret in motorsports. Competing in Trans Am is a fraction of the cost of any other comparable racing series out there.
And helps you get your foot in the door in terms of other motorsport as well, because if it just allows you to prove yourself and maybe allow other teams in other series to give you a chance, even if it's just for a one-off race, it's still more than you might get if you didn't have that.
100%. Yeah, I credit Trans Am with kind of the resurgence of my career. I spent 10 years between the start of my driving career and my current phase of my driving career, just coaching and trying to find the odd ride here and there, and trying to build a reputation in the industry. And when I got into Trans Am and had success there, that put me back on the map and enabled me to do all these other things.
A couple of fun non-motorsport related questions to finish off with. What are the last few songs you've listened to?
That's a great question. I'd have to pull up my Spotify and see. I would say something by the Mars Volta, I think, was the last thing playing on my Spotify, together with something from the Strokes and probably something from Atmosphere.
Not a bad combination.
Yeah.
And then finally, if you could live anywhere in the world that you've never been to before, where would you choose?
Somewhere in Italy, I think. Every time I've been to Italy, I've never had a bad meal, so I think I'd start there.
I don't think they're allowed to do bad meals over there, to be honest.
No, that's my favorite part about it. Yeah, that and the espresso.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you today. I want to thank you very much for your time and wish you best of luck with everything for the rest of 2023.
Thanks, man. It was great talking to you.
Thanks again to Thomas for coming onto the Kerbs with me. I can't wait to see how he gets on in the rest of 2023. If you want to follow Thomas's career, links to his socials will be in the description below, so do go and check those out. Join me again next time when I'll be chatting to another famous face from the world of motorsport. In the meantime, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, as well as check out the back catalogue of episodes on the On the Kerbs channel. If you want even more from me, you can listen to me chat about everything Formula 1 over on the Undercut Podcast, as well as delving into the world of Nitro Rallycross over on the Nitro RX Podcast. Both are available wherever you get your podcasts. As for written content, I currently write for Is It Fast, Paddock Sorority and Paddock Passion, so be sure to check all of them out with original pieces released each week. All of the information and links for those will be in the description below, as well as my Instagram handle if you want to go and follow me there. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll be back soon with another episode.